Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll provide another installation to our Anti-Federalist Papers series going on number 52. So if you haven't gone back and watched 1 through 51, I would highly encourage you to do so, because understanding the Anti-Federalist Papers, in addition to the Federalist Papers, will provide you a very well-rounded, advantageous understanding of the U.S. Constitution, and understanding the U.S. Constitution will be absolutely necessary if you intend to combat any sort of lawfare waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the Anti-Federalist Papers. There are multiple institutions from which you can get a paper and digital copy of the Anti-Federalist Papers. Go ahead and get both formats just in case you can't access one or the other for whatever infinite number of reasons. And while you're out there looking, go ahead and get a copy of the Federalist Papers so you can join us in comparing and contrasting the arguments for and against ratifying the U.S. Constitution. Excellent. So number 52 is titled On the Guarantee of Congressional Biennial Elections. This quick qualifier says the following essay was signed by Consider Arms, Malachi Mannard, and Samuel Field. It was taken from the Hampshire Gazette of April 9th, 1788. They say this: "We are the subscribers being of the number who did not assent to the ratification of the federal constitution under consideration in the late state convention held at Boston, to which we were called by the suffrages of the corporations to which we respectively belong, beg leave through the channel of your paper to lay before the public in general and our constituents in particular the reasons of our dissent and the principles which governed us in our decision of this important question. Fully convinced, ever since the late Revolution, of the necessity of a firm, energetic government, we should have rejoiced in an opportunity to have given our assent to such a one, and should in the present case most cordially have done it, could we at the same time been happy to have seen the liberties of the people and the rights of mankind properly guarded and secured. We conceive that the very notion of government carries along with it the idea of justice and equity, and that the whole design of instituting government in the world was to preserve men's properties from rapine, and their bodies from violence and bloodshed. These propositions being established, we conceive must of necessity produce the following consequence: that every constitution or system which does not quadrate with this original design is not government, but in fact a subversion of it." Go ahead and highlight that. So incredibly important. Any government, in quotes, any laws, in quotes, any actions, in quotes, which are contrary to this foundational principle that he described, is not a government, but a subversion of government. So important. And you're going to see that very well, well, you can say very well, very effectively. That's the word I'm looking for. Very effectively articulated if you join us in reading through Algernon Sidney's A Discourse or Discourses Concerning Government. Very brilliantly laid out by Mr. Sidney. Having premised thus much, we proceed to mention some things in this Constitution to which we object, and to enter into an inquiry whether and how far they coincide with those simple and original notions of government before mentioned. In the first place, as direct taxes are to be apportioned according to the numbers in each state, and as Massachusetts has none in it but what are declared free men, so the whole, blacks as well as whites, must be numbered. This must therefore operate against us, as 2/5 of the slaves in the southern states are to be left out of the numeration. Consequently, three Massachusetts infants will increase the tax equal to 5 sturdy, full-grown Negroes of theirs, who work every day in the week of their masters, saving the Sabbath, upon which they are allowed to get something for their own support. We can see no justice in this way of apportioning taxes. Neither can we see any good reason why this was consented to on the part of our delegates. We suppose it next to impossible that every individual in this vast continental union should have his wish with regard to every single article composing a frame of government. And therefore, although we think it more agreeable to the principles of republicanism that elections should be annual, yet as the elections in our own state governments are so, we did not view it so dangerous to the liberties of the people that we should have rejected the Constitution merely on account of the biennial elections of the representatives, had we been sure that the people have any security even of this. But this we could not find. For although it is said that quote, the House of Representatives shall be chosen every second year by the people of the several states, etc., and that, quote, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. Yet all this is wholly superseded by a subsequent provision which empowers Congress at any time to enact a law whereby such regulations may be altered, except as to the places of choosing senators. Here we conceive the people may be very materially injured, and in time reduced to a state of as abject vassalage as any people were under the control of the most mercenary despot that ever tarnished the pages of history. The depravity of human nature, illustrated by examples from history, will warrant us to say it may be possible, if not probable, that the Congress may be composed of men who will wish to burden and oppress the people. In such case, will not their inventions be fruitful enough to devise occasions for postponing of the elections? And if they can do this once, they can do it twice. They can twice. If they can twice, they can thrice, so by degrees render themselves absolute and perpetual. Or if they choose, they have another expedient. They can alter the place of holding elections. They can say, whatever the legislature of this state may order to the contrary, that all the elections of our representatives shall be made at Machias or at Williamstown. Consequently, 9/10 of the people will never vote. And if this should be thought a measure favorable to their re-election or the election of some tool for their mercenary purposes, we doubt not it will be thus ordered. But says the advocates for the Constitution, quote, it is not likely this will ever happen. We are not to expect our rulers will ever proceed to a wanton exercise of the powers given them. Did that come true? Was that an accurate prediction? But what reason have we more than past ages to expect that we shall be blessed with impeccable rulers, if only men were angels? That is the key phrase that you will see repeated time and time again in these papers. If only men were angels. Does the Constitution work? Does the U.S. Constitution work? Does this proposed new government work? If only men were angels. We think not any. Although it has been said that every generation grows wiser and wiser, yet we have no reason to think they grow better and better. Go ahead and highlight that. Not necessarily one directly supporting or contradicting the U.S. Constitution, but it's a fairly applicable, universally applicable principle of history and the nature of man. And therefore the probability lies upon the dark side. Does not the experience of past ages leach that men have generally exercised all the powers they had given them, and even have usurped upon them, in order to accomplish their own sinister and avaricious designs whenever they thought they could do it with impunity? This, we presume, will not be denied. And it appeared to us that the arguments made use of by the favorers of the Constitution in the late convention at Boston proceeded upon the plan of righteousness in those who are to rule over us by virtue of this new form of government. But these arguments, we confess, would have no weight with us, while we judge them to be founded altogether upon a slippery perhaps. A slippery perhaps, like a slippery soap fallacy. We are sensible that in order to the due administration of government, it is necessary that certain powers should be delegated to the rulers from the people. The just powers of government are derived from what? The consent of the governed. Or from whom? The consent of the governed. Well, I guess it would be from what, because it's referring to consent. The consent of the governed. I digress. At the same time, we think they ought carefully to guard against giving so much as will enable those rulers by that means at once, or even in process of time, to render themselves absolute and despotic. This we think is the case with the form of government lately submitted to our consideration. We could not, therefore, acting uprightly, consulting our own good and the good of our constituents, I don't know why I pronounce that so weirdly, constituents, give our assent unto it. We could not then, and we still cannot see, that because people are many times guilty of crimes and deserving of punishment, that it from thence follows the authority ought to have power to punish them when they are not guilty, or to punish the innocent with the guilty I lost my place. When they are not guilty, or to punish the innocent with the guilty without discrimination, which amounts to the same thing. I don't know how I lost my place there. But this we think, in fact, to be the case as to this federal constitution. For the Congress, whether they have provocation or not, can at any time order the elections in any or all of the states to be conducted in such manner as wholly to defeat and render entirely nugatory the intention of those elections, and convert that which was considered and intended to be the palladium of the liberties of the people, the grand bulwark against any invasion upon them, into a formidable engine by which to overthrow them all, and thus involve them in the depth of misery and distress. But it was pled by some of the ablest advocates of the Constitution that if Congress should exercise such powers to the prejudice of the people, and they did not deny, but they could if they should be disposed, they, the people, would not suffer it. Did that come true? They would have recourse to the ultima ratio, the dernier resort of the oppressed, the sword. Madison verbatim said in one of the Federalist Papers, I think it was in the 50s, the Federalist 50s, or the 50 number range. He said, if the Union government does become energetic and ambitious and tyrannical, and tries to raise a standing army, the citizens will outnumber that standing army, 1 to 25 in terms of citizens, and 1 to 10 in terms of able-bodied young men. And he said the citizens are duty-bound, obligated, to take up not just diplomatic recourse and grievance, but to take up arms. You as a citizen, and not of the U.S., but as a citizen of your state, are duty-bound, obligated, according to the Father of the U.S. Constitution, to take up arms against any standing army that will be raised. Is that true? The duty and the obligation is, but is it upheld? Not very often. So this dismissive nature from the Federalists regarding the inevitable encroachments of the federal government didn't turn out to be so disciplined, didn't turn out to be so confrontational as the Federalists believed. But it appeared to us a piece of superlative incongruity indeed, that the people, whilst in the full and indefeasible possession of their liberties and privileges, should be so very profuse, so very liberal in the disposal of them, as consequently to place themselves in a predicament miserable to an extreme. So wretched indeed that they may at once be reduced to the sad alternative of yielding themselves vassals into the hands of a venal and corrupt administration, whose only wish may be to aggrandize themselves and families, to wallow in luxury and every species of dissipation, and ride upon the spoils of the community, or take up the sword and involve their country in all the horrors of a civil war, the consequences of which we think we may venture to augur will more firmly rivet their shackles and end in the entailment of vassalage to their posterity. Very well put. Federalists knew, which is why Madison even entertained the idea that an ambitious government will come about from the U.S. Constitution and raise a standing army that would ultimately subjugate the citizenry. They knew the U.S. Constitution was chock full of ambiguous, equivocal legalese that will be exploited by tyrannical wicked men. If you knew that, why take that risk? Why provide that ultimatum? Why be willing to surrender, to sacrifice the citizens to their supposed disciplines to conduct a painful, stressful civil war, internal conflict, better put. There's nothing civil about a civil war. Why subject the citizens to that possibility when you could have avoided it just by not ratifying the U.S. Constitution? Let the states do what they do best. Don't impose this union government. Don't force people to try to get along, because when you do that, that's when you get internal conflict. That's when you get war. That's when you get bloodshed. The better answer was one that the founders eventually developed, which is, if you don't like how a state's running its operations, running its government, move, or petition for the government to change. Don't demand that the union government like what happened in the 60s, 1860s. Don't demand that the Union government come in and reconstruct that state government because it upsets you. Leave. Go to a different state. That was the whole point of the states keeping their constitutions. That was the whole point of the states keeping their governments, keeping their branches of government, keeping their own constitutions, keeping their own flags. So that way, if you didn't like how Texas operates, you can go to California. If you don't like how California does it, go to Oregon. If you don't like Oregon, go to Washington. If you don't like Washington, you get my point. That's exactly what he's articulating here. Why subject the citizens to that wretched possibility of internal domestic warfare? Why take that chance? It makes no sense. We think this by no means can fall within the description of government. Wow, excuse me. Let me try that again. We think this by no means can fall within the description of government before mentioned. There we go. Good job, Johnny Two Shoes. You can actually read. Neither can we think these suggestions merely chimerical, or that they proceed from an overheated enthusiasm in favor of republicanism. Neither yet from an ill-placed detestation of aristocracy, but from the apparent danger the people are in by establishing this Constitution. When we take a forward view of the proposed Congress, seated in the federal city 10 miles square, fortified and replenished with all kinds of military stores and every implement, with a navy at command on one side and a land army on the other, we say, when we view them thus possessed of the sword in one hand and the purse strings of the people in the other, we can see no security left for them in the enjoyment of their liberties, but what may proceed from the bare possibility that the supreme authority of the nation may be possessed of virtue and integrity sufficient to influence them in the administration of equal justice and equity among those whom they shall govern. But why should we voluntarily choose to trust our all upon so precarious a tenure as this? We confess it gives us pain to anticipate the future scene, a scene presenting to view miseries as so complicated and extreme that it may be part of the charms of eloquence to extenuate, or the power of art to remove. Excellent. So that is all to be said in number 52. If you have any questions about what was said in number 52, maybe questions about what was said in the preceding papers, or if there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, go ahead and post those down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to provide you with the necessary skills and information to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So please, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, go ahead and let me know how I can do better so I can best serve that purpose of helping you. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'm not sure what the topic for the next lecture is going to be, but I'll do my best to make it as informative and entertaining as this one, if not more so. Regardless of the topic of the next lecture, until I see y'all then, I bid you all farewell.